This student, who barely weighed 2 tons, had been transferred to a delinquent school. The person who first showed him around was the class delegate, one of the potential future husbands of the big, fat boy. In the future, he would also attract the attention of the most beautiful girl in school, an irresistible blonde who approached him every day to flirt, hoping to get a date. If that brute agreed, everything could turn into a real disaster. However, he firmly believed that, in the end, the fat boy would prefer dark-haired girls. In the cafeteria, several delinquents tried to bother the leader of the first-year students, an attractive and brave girl. They even pushed her, but our 2-ton giant quickly saved her. He wasn't wearing any cape, only his weight to carry, which enraged the attackers, who returned to harass him. With just a cold glance, he managed to scare them all away. Peace was restored in that moment for the enormous student. But a new problem emerged. He attracted the attention of a higher-ranking leader. After challenging the school hierarchy, this boy was slapped as punishment. At first, the fat boy thought the attacker was slow, so he easily dodged the seemingly imminent blow. However, a future fracture awaited him if he kept avoiding the fight. Remembering the promise he made to his mother to graduate peacefully, he decided to stop. The blow landed squarely on his face, but he pretended to be hurt. It was all a theatrical act. The girl wanted him to go to the infirmary, but he didn't even feel the assault. In the classroom, everyone seemed to mock his size. He looked like a giant truck sitting in his seat, so big that he filled the entire chair. However, this mockery would soon end. When a bully tried to attack a weaker classmate and failed miserably, he became furious at the laughter of others and wanted to vent his rage on the first person he found. Unintentionally, that brat would have the worst luck of the day. The fat boy stood firm, like the wall of an impenetrable fortress. The bully gathered all his strength to slap him, but just before impact, the giant reacted with an instant counterattack. In the blink of an eye, he received a blow so brutal that he lost consciousness and crashed into the wall. No one in the room could believe what had happened, not even the strongest. The astonishing thing was that the attacker fell asleep in a state of complete shock, as if his body had reacted reflexively. Later, during class, everyone remained in total silence, saying not a single word, except for the unconscious boy who was still out cold. The situation surprised everyone present, and the teacher, curious, asked them what circumstances maintained such unexpected calm. The response was a muffled cry of horror, insisting that everything was in order. The teacher, stunned, watched the strange behavior of the student. Everyone knew very well that they must not be discovered, not even to appear normal. Both the teacher and the delegate were very intrigued by this unusual attitude. Meanwhile, one of the minor leaders silently pondered, lost in thought. A few minutes earlier, everyone was surprised by what had happened. The event sparked great curiosity about the new student who had defeated Hydra with a single blow. Someone quickly got up from their seat to share the news with the whole school, but suddenly someone noticed that their words were directed exclusively at the newcomer. Bullface, with a defiant expression, threatened to intimidate and harass anyone who tried to spread the incident until graduation. Then, the boy suggested that everyone at the school probably hated having him nearby. The girls gossiping and finding the new student strange agreed with that idea, leaving the boy speechless. Then he ordered his friends to handle the problem, successfully dragging his defeated friend back to his seat. Bullfist began to question his own vulnerability, which intrigued those present. Shortly after class, he and his friends gathered in a secluded corner. When asked about their condition, Huang and Sin, struggling to speak, confirmed that they thought they had died. When questioned about the reason for their secret meeting, the leader said he wasn't sure. He just wanted to confront that particular person directly. Just at that moment, the stranger arrived, looked perplexed for a few seconds, and started to drool at the sight of the feared transfer student. Young who asked him to calm down, but the boy, paralyzed by fear, couldn't understand simple words. Huang Xin ran away, fleeing from what he believed was a monster. Seeing this, his boss had no choice but to slap him in the face to force him to calm down. Everyone was stunned by the child's childish attitude. Then, the young leader turned to the protagonist, and the others demanded an explanation. Nook shouted loudly, surprising everyone, then calmly declared that he only wanted a peaceful school life. Then, in a threatening tone, he asked for help. The less confident thought it was just intimidation, but at that moment, his leader extended his hand in a gesture of friendship, causing everyone to be confused by the unexpected acceptance. Young-hoo suggested joining forces so that both could achieve their goals. The rest of the group was surprised that everything had been resolved so peacefully. Bulphus stated that it was the best decision since his new friend seemed to be a kind person. One of them tried to argue that he still provoked them, but the leader claimed the opposite, that it was actually them who started the trouble. Therefore, he asked for forgiveness and reconciliation. Gradually, the friends introduced themselves and befriended the protagonist, except for the one still unconscious. After that, one of the students asked the overweight boy if he knew all the school rules. When he remained silent, it became clear that the tall boy completely ignored them. At that moment, he explained that in this school, everyone was bound by a set of implicit rules. The protagonist had learned many of them on his own, though he had to understand that grades followed a hierarchical order and each group had an expected leader. The young man then told him that the leader of the class had been recently chosen and, when asked about his identity, revealed that it was the savage brown bear. They then inquired if Park Tuk's status would be unquestionable. He clarified that his title could be taken away by anyone who managed to beat him in a one-on-one fight, although that was a difficult task. The students agreed that school life and promotions within the hierarchy were heavily influenced by this leader. Just as he was about to dismiss the current chief, his mouth was suddenly sealed. The big boy looked confused, while his new friends were terrified. Then Park Kook appeared with several of his subordinates. When the barbarian asked why they were there, Young-hoo stated that they all had the same reasons. The henchmen of the brown bear began to mock Young-hoo for his foolish arrogance. Angry, the class leader ordered that he be brought bread and strawberry milk, but Young-hoo, defying him, stepped away and said that Park Kook was already too fat for such things. The class chief, reacting angrily to that provocation, abruptly interrupted, demanding to know who thought they were with such arrogance. However, he was interrupted again when someone asked him to show respect and to stop harassing others. Annoyed by this false modesty, the big leader demanded an explanation but received no answer. Taking advantage of the moment, one of the henchmen seized the chance to humiliate a third person. Then, he made a threatening expression and told Nawak that the big one wanted to talk to him. When he received no response, he began mocking his weight, especially his overly large chest. At that moment, the boy realized that the protagonist was the one who had hit him in the cafeteria and laughed about it. Then, he threatened to make that his third shame by punching him in the face, thinking his silence was fear. But just as he was about to mock the hero's hat, the calm boy asked him to put it back in its place. The protagonist's expression was so touching that the henchman began to tremble, and carefully, he took his hat and placed it back on his head. The brown bear had difficulty processing what had happened and was about to get angry with his henchman for such a pathetic failure. Suddenly, someone called him. The boss turned around. The young thugs now found themselves in front of a group of girls, and one of them asked if any of them belonged to the first-year students. The barbarian tried to appear as polite as possible, even though he was actually one of the top students in his class, Kim So-young, who possessed an impressive beauty. Upon noticing our protagonist, her expression filled with disdain as she observed his obesity. The honorary student wanted the brown bear to accompany her, as Susie, one of the girls, desired to talk to him. Susie's presence heightened the excitement of the giant, since she was a second-year student, and he quickly approached with joy to meet the girl. His sudden movement drew the attention of his henchmen, who paused for a moment, and he ordered them to take care of the rebels. The atmosphere abruptly changed, turning more violent and tense. The person who had initially gone to intimidate the protagonist asked them to stop exerting pressure. But when he saw that he would not be listened to, he decided to flee before things got worse. In an instant, our hero and his friends were surrounded, since when the leader gave an order, his word was final. Ignoring it meant risking punishment from the very person issuing the command. Therefore, upon receiving orders, no one could disobey. Following this logic, the guy with the afro explained that, as first-year students, they were obliged to respect their leader's orders. However, at that moment, they began to initiate their game of humiliation, and the biggest among them struck the stomach of the first student, causing him pain he could not contain. The scene caused disbelief among the others. Nazen Wook, who had witnessed everything, was particularly angry about this injustice. The thugs began joking about the stern looks they received from Bullfist, but just when the afro-haired one tried to explain that they were at their limits, he was interrupted by the protagonist himself. Despite having difficulty following the rules, he declared that anyone who tormented others was an enemy. One of the students, annoyed by these words, made a grimace and claimed that the leader's orders were law, only to be silenced by the fat guy, who raised his voice. Nook declared that the bullies were his enemies, and at that moment, our hero decided to take control of the tormentors. Elsewhere in the school, during an important meeting, Zombie told his superiors that the brown bear had been officially designated as the leader of the first-year students. This caused someone to burst out in hysterical laughter. Subsequently, someone asked the young blonde who, in his opinion, would win in a fight between him and the new leader of the novices. June stated that the brown bear was still a weak rookie. Angry, the boy stood up from his chair, making Zombie uncomfortable, and asked him to clarify whether he truly believed he would win or not. The blonde confirmed and asserted that the tall boy in the red t-shirt was unique in his group. At that moment, the protagonist, considering the bully his enemy, decided to initiate an attack. Without hesitation, he jumped into the air, adopting a fighting stance, followed almost immediately by another move. Thanks to his agility in movement, everything was perfectly prepared. The scene left everyone intrigued, as this move was a dance of steps, a secret technique hidden in the shadows that blinded opponents, leaving them unable to see. One of the bullies thought he had caught the hero's only word, so he attempted directed strikes at him. However, his powerful attack disappeared silently into the fog. The confused villain failed to locate the fat hero, who suddenly appeared behind him and whispered in his ear, frightening him deeply. At that moment, the enemy was thrown against the wall, and while the others couldn't believe what had just happened, another bully was surprised and defeated with a single blow. The afro-haired player was paralyzed by the situation and unable to understand what was happening. Everyone was now at the mercy of this gentle soul, which continued to hide in the fog. The student was horrified, thinking that this technique was a trap. But at that very moment, he found himself alone in a vast white sea. However, when the cloud of smoke began to dissipate, the afro-haired boy, still dazed, struggled to believe what he was seeing with his own eyes. Meanwhile, in a safe place, the protagonist's friends began to scold him for his actions, confused by his attitude, as they preferred to escape rather than fight. One of them commented that they were doomed, as his violation of the rules would surely lead to intervention from the elders. The leader said that if it weren't for the protagonist's action, he himself would have faced the situation, and they should think about what to do next. Everyone was stunned, knowing that the elders would surely investigate their offense. Only then did the leader realize that someone else was missing. Meanwhile, on the afro-haired side, the boy found himself facing an impressive presence with an aura of great power. Seeing this magnitude, the thug immediately thought it might be the true boss of the group. It turned out to be a hydra, recently awakened from a forced nap. When asked if he was truly the one in charge, the student confidently told Brown Bear that yes, and that they had been attacked by Hang and Sin, although the leader had his doubts. The thugs assured Brown Bear that the one who looked like just another person was actually the boss, and that he probably played with a parrot to hide his true authority. Hydra apologized, saying he didn't understand what was happening, and then smiled maliciously, pretending to be unaware of everything. The thug, horrified, pointed out the sinister expression on the alleged leader's face, and inwardly thought that he seemed like a man lost in delusions before his superior. After Park asked him once more if he was truly behind everything, Hang Sin denied calmly, wondering if he had even shown a wicked smile. At that moment, someone entered the building, and just as Brown Bear was questioning the young man, This additional presence clearly stated that Hydra was not the culprit they were looking for. The boss, intrigued, turned to get a better look. His henchmen insisted they had brought the real responsible party, but they were quickly silenced by their superior, angry. Then the doubts cleared. The naive student couldn't be responsible for the assaults on his subordinates, confirming that only Bullfist remained among the suspects. Both faced each other once more. Park Duck began to think about what he could ask for to remedy this injustice, but when he received no response, he decided to mention the elders, saying that Bullfist and his gang would get into trouble if they intervened, which immediately led to apologies being made. The thugs, interpreting this attitude as a sign of weakness, mocked the young man until their leader ordered them to show respect, leaving them humiliated and silent. Young, who wanted his enemy to punish him and leave his men alone. Kiduk, meanwhile, asked what would happen to the affected individual but did not claim he would give up anything for his freedom. Since Hydra hadn't caused him personal harm, Brown Bear ordered him to leave, and the young man, frightened, received a signal from his leader telling him to withdraw. After that, Sin, defeated, got up, thanked his leader and left the room. The great boss then recalled Bullfist's words and told his men not to be too aggressive from the start. Seeing that the henchmen were eager for a fight, Young, who braced himself for the worst. The first student lunged at Bullfist and kicked him in the stomach. The blow was so powerful that the young man fell backward, but he quickly recovered and kicked again in the same spot. Brown Bear watched in disbelief as his subordinates began striking and continued striking his enemy without stopping, surprising even the boss. But upon seeing the opponent's resistance, Brown Bear felt that something within him was awakening. Afro, who seemed to enjoy the fight, was suddenly grabbed by the shoulder and effortlessly thrown by his violent leader. The scene made Bullfist start to anticipate the worst, noticing that his opponent was resisting with such strength that even the leader considered taking his own shot against him. Then, violently, he grabbed the young man's leg and tried to twist it. Horror spread as his leader declared that Yonghu shouldn't defend himself and must passively submit to the torture. Shortly after, Bullfist's friends, who came to his aid, arrived running and were horrified upon seeing the scene. The young man greeted them with a smile, despite being in a terrible state, and was glad to see his friends. Tai, still very angry about the injustice, showed a contained fury that only wanted to vent, although his leader had stopped that intent. Young Tai, surprised by Yonghu's calmness, couldn't understand how he could be so at ease, especially considering his leg was broken, an injury Yonghu himself attributed to a motorcycle accident. While some believed his explanation, others, including Young Tai, remained suspicious. Then, he asked what the next step should be, but the hospitalized leader said he had no idea. Mentioning the possibility that Brown Bear and his group could return to harm him, the young man assured that, once fully recovered, he would register with the BTS system, and he reiterated the importance of everyone being careful at all times. The mention of BTS confused one of the newcomers, who commented that he shouldn't worry about them, but rather about his own safety. Bullfist, jokingly, expressed his desire to have some free time outside of classes. As the cheerful conversation continued, Young Tai watched as the large man stood up and started to leave the room, drawing everyone's attention. One of those present ran after him, demanding that he stop. Nook, who had paused, asked him to cease his actions, and Jungai stated that the responsibility for what had happened fell on the main character, suggesting that if it weren't for his neighbor, everything would have ended in betrayal. He also added that Bullfist had never considered our hero a friend, which was why the leader had tried to warn him instead. The young man warned that if he caused trouble again, he would report him to the elders, which caused a shadowed look that surprised him. Nook apologized, admitting that he sometimes liked to act this way, although it complicated the situation, and the main character asked for 3 days to plan his next moves, reaffirming that he only needed that short period, then went silent. Young Tai was still trying to process what had happened. Nook finally revealed his left arm, and what the young man saw was difficult to understand. Part 8 of 25. The promise of the injured to make amends for his mistakes made it clear that he intended to teach a lesson to those who harm his loved ones. Soon after, everyone received a notification. The BTS battle system had been activated. The news sparked general curiosity, as a fight between freshmen was announced. The leader of the first-year group, named Brown, was required to face an opponent who surprised everyone, as he turned out to be the transferred student himself, nicknamed the Helpless One. With his tattoo finally visible, our hero began to consider each of his upcoming actions as a way to defend himself. The system known as the Combat Objective System, or COS, was governed by unbreakable rules. The first rule stipulated that only those not bound by agreements with seniors could obtain tickets to watch the fights. The second rule required any relevant leader to accept immediately a challenge proposed by a helpless one, who could only fight once against each nominated leader. The third rule established that the matches would be unarmed and equal in conditions. The fourth stated that if a helpless student managed to become a leader, his peers of the same rank had to obey him without resistance. The last rule reserved the final decision to the school's king. Young, who recounted that will explained everything enthusiastically, only to be looked at with confusion by the others in the hospital. Seeing that he was talking to himself, the boy blushed with embarrassment, which was interpreted as if he had suffered some brain damage. Suddenly, his phone started ringing. Hydra asked if he could see clearly. Bullfist began to consider the situation. At that moment, in the middle of the arena, Nook was about to do something unthinkable, while the two giants faced each other head-to-head. Everyone was surprised at how early the SBC fights had started, since the official ceremony to crown the first-level leader had not yet taken place. Only then did the students realize that only those chosen by third-year students could participate in the SBC, sparking their curiosity about the identity of the protagonist. Although shrouded in mystery, they could not discuss it, as the approval came directly from the school's king. For this reason, surprised first-year students understood that they had already arrived, as their seniors had made their entrance. All froze and straightened up to salute the second years. Oh Changio, chief of the 98 and considered the strongest among the second years, impatiently demanded to know what was causing the commotion. Zombie pointed out that the whole school was in chaos, while his friends remained silent. Susie observed the calm giant with an intimidating expression and was impressed by him, as he was the type of man she liked. Amid the sudden affection for the protagonist, the girl ran toward her treatment companions. Some of them followed her, sprinting across the room. Her beauty caught the attention of the first-year students, among whom an intrigued brown bear was present. Then she turned around and formally greeted the second-year students. The seniors looked at her with disdain, demanding she show respect, but they ignored her and continued on their way. The second-year student decided to sit down instead. When asked about the hero who had caused all the trouble, Zombie explained that he was a transfer student who had arrived just the day before. The 98s showed interest in the boy, considered a bit overweight, who requested to participate in the SBC just a few days after his arrival. At that moment, the second-year students felt a sudden, overwhelming pressure. Sensing the presence of their seniors nearby, everyone stood up in a gesture of respect. Both the brown bear and the tiger also felt this crushing force. The second-year leader couldn't help but admire the strength of their seniors. Suddenly, the senior students arrived. The third years entered confidently and with authority. Oh Changuk urged his men to stand firm and remain silent, aiming to coordinate with the third-year students. All of them greeted the elders with a single loud and united voice. Number 4 found that greeting too loud, while Number 6 commented on how long it had been since they last saw BTS. Number 5 appeared exhausted, whereas Number 3 remained impassive. Kim Tae pointed out how difficult it was to distinguish Changuk. The second-year leader tried to appear humble, leaning slightly forward to look ahead, but was horrified to see only one person among the third years. One step closer to that figure, and the whole school began to tremble. The imposing presence was none other than the third-year leader, Maekpil, also known as the King. With this, the school director made his formal entrance. Everyone quickly returned to their places, including the king. All were captivated by that figure, as he was the one who governed the school. No one could take their eyes off his impressive presence. Maekpil began to speak, assuring that he would be brief and that it had been a long time since the last BTS. Then he pointed out how many wondered why an outsider like today's challenger could participate in the competition. Thus, The king declared in an imposing tone that it was his decision, surprising everyone. His followers nodded and understood the command, and the king decided to inaugurate the fights. Accordingly, Zombie would act as the referee in the first round of the BTS, facing the great leader, the brown bear who had many followers, against the transfer student who had few friends, including a wounded group leader. The blonde explained that the fight would end when one of the two admitted defeat, fell, or if some problem arose. Then, the superior touched his subordinates in certain private areas, ensuring that only in those zones was touching forbidden. After that, the combat began. The audience cheered when the second-year standard-bearer launched his first attack. Nook immediately blocked it with a solid defense that repelled the second strike. The great leader attacked with a flurry of blows, but the transfer student remained on the defensive. This enraged the brown bear, who interpreted the lack of offense as a kind of disdain. Believing that the transfer student was mocking him, the bear grew furious and launched a series of powerful strikes that forced Nook to retreat. His henchmen were very pleased with his performance, but the third-year student claimed that his opponent was actually the one truly in control of the fight. Everyone was intrigued by that kind soul who calmly endured all the attacks thrown at him. But what was most surprising was that it seemed to be the attacker who, in reality, was showing signs of exhaustion. Park Duke realized that the situation was not simple, because despite being the one to initiate the attack, he unmistakably felt that he was the one receiving the blows. Just as he was beginning to reflect on the protagonist's plan, the latter spoke to him in his usual relaxed tone, suggesting that he apologize so that he could show mercy. However, the proud brown bear outright refused to do so. Our hero stated that this would be his last chance to make amends. The great leader was surprised to see him so exhausted and, therefore, thought that this fatigue might be the work of someone in particular. About 3 hours ago, the brown bear had informed the afro-haired person that his opponent would be the transfer student who had been humiliated by Sadako. Just as that slender student was starting to comment on how simple that test would be, he suddenly encountered someone else. The bully turned around and apologized, but soon realized that the person he had overtaken was none other than Sudeko. The third year was particularly annoyed by being called simply by his name, so he formally corrected himself and apologized for his arrogant attitude. Then, the third year carefully observed the giant in front of him to point out how completely disrespectful that class was. Sadako was especially interested in the leader of the new recruits, and just when the young Ganowin began to speak disrespectfully, the elder reacted quickly. In the blink of an eye, they positioned themselves mere centimeters apart. Sadako smiled and claimed that the brown bear would end up losing. The tall one asked for an explanation, and he clarified that he would not be able to triumph over the protagonist, highlighting his supposed weakness and suggesting that he pray for the fight to be cancelled. The henchman of the high-ranking individual tried to calm him down, saying that the old man only spoke like that to save his skin. However, the situation worried him, as he was starting to doubt his own chances of victory. The brown bear was pulled out of his contemplation by that gentle soul who urged him to respond. Immediately afterward, the class leader left very angry. One of the observers noticed that the head of the first-year students seemed more excited than during that first-year contest. Without hesitation, he began to bombard our hero with blows, strike after strike, showing no signs of fatigue. To everyone's surprise, his opponent didn't seem impressed at all. His imposing figure seemed to grow even larger as he resorted to his absorption technique. No one could believe what they were seeing. With the technique completed, Nook pointed out how his opponent had rejected the mercy he had offered him. Then, he remembered an old saying that stated everyone should face someone of similar strength. The boy who uttered this maxim took a moment to process its meaning, then decided to honor those words with an act. He lunged with determination at his opponent, as if trying to purge him of his sins. The protagonist urged him to watch carefully. The brown bear was overwhelmed by such a strange and excessive force. Then, our hero decided to use his technique known as heart cleansing with his right fist, a blow weighing approximately 50 pounds, executed with only that hand. The first senior-level boss, upon seeing himself defeated, soon realized that his opponent was furious. As a result, the brown bear found himself under a barrage of strikes. The severity of the attacks made it impossible for him to breathe normally. The antagonist's henchmen couldn't believe what they were witnessing, especially the tallest one, unable to accept the adversary's power. Our hero asked him to apologize, seeking to resolve everything before pulling a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. However, the referee scolded him for trying to smoke, as it was forbidden. Meanwhile, the brown bear, in his desperation to not accept his potential defeat, reached into his pocket and pulled out a brass knuckle. With a treacherous attitude, he tried to land a surprise blow to our hero's head, causing blood to spatter onto the floor, blood coming from an innocent. The scene left everyone breathless, unable to comprehend how the bear had broken the main rule by using a weapon to win. The situation took an even more shocking turn, leaving the spectators in shock. As Susie struggled to accept what had happened, the referee, surprised, nearly disqualified the young man for being in possession of a weapon. But he was interrupted by someone's laughter, a laugh that echoed with unsettling intensity. He tried to call a cheetah to intervene, but was silenced once again by that same roar of laughter. The figure that appeared was none other than the king, laughing with genuine disdain, a sinister laugh that sent shivers through everyone present. The monarch's laugh sent a chill down each student's spine. The zombie attempted to stop the fight, but boss number 97 ordered him to resume it at all costs. No one could deny that a sacred rule had been broken. The referee tried to argue, but there was no room for negotiation. From the podium, the king shouted the order to continue the fight, and his powerful voice generated a shockwave that even caused some students to lose consciousness. The second-year student found himself confronting an indomitable force, a true manifestation of the supreme power of the school's rector. With no alternative, he was forced to return to the battle. Bullfist, frustrated by the madness, tried to stand up despite his injury, but the nurse prevented him from doing so. The Hydra, distressed, fell to the ground unable to comprehend such barbarity, watching his injured and fallen comrade. Susie also began to question the king's words. Meanwhile, the brown bear who had lost control recalled what Sadako said about his belonging to the transferred class. The monarch ordered him to end the fight, foreseeing that the barbarian would attack the hero fiercely. At that very moment, someone saved the bulkier one by blocking the blow with his face just before collapsing to the ground. It was young Tai, who surprised his friend with an act of heroism. The first-grade leader found himself facing two defenseless individuals on the floor, which deeply perplexed him. However, the unquestionable authority of the school urged him to conclude the fight without delay. At that moment, a young man cursed and bled verbally and physically against someone, who was later known as Park Ki-duk. This young man despised life and was considered useless by the aggressor. But years later, during a fight, he began to look for excuses to justify his failures. Suddenly, he delivered a devastating blow that allowed him to defeat his opponent. The young man, in a way, was grateful to the one who helped him understand his resilience and determination. After hearing the applause of some nearby children, that boy who previously believed himself incapable found something he excelled at. Although all his fights ended with his opponents on the ground, Ki-duk realized that others' love and respect depended on the number of victories he achieved. This led him to understand that he must triumph at all costs, claiming that only thus would he increase his prestige if he ever allowed himself to be defeated. At that moment, he was pulled out of his thoughts by the protagonist, who asked him to focus on the fight. Part 13 of 25. The brown bear was paralyzed with fear, as the hero declared that there was no turning back. Even the third-grade students felt the pressure, for No stated that he would guide the young man toward redemption. With that declaration, a seal was invoked that sealed his fate. The young armed man charged again with determination, only to be skillfully dodged with a backward movement. Our hero prepared himself, surprising even the king, and finally set to deliver his strike. The overwhelming truth was revealed at that moment, leaving everyone speechless, especially Park Ki-duk, who found himself facing an unstoppable force. Thus, the final blow was struck, and with that victory of the underdog, our protagonist was crowned as the 99th leader. At that time, Susie, watching the participants, blushed when she realized that the young woman had fallen in love with that sturdy protagonist, a man she found attractive. Moreover, she was particularly drawn to his rounded belly. Seeing him take a blow to the head, Suzy reacted with anger, which provoked a mocking smile from the Korean beagle, leaving her somewhat embarrassed. While our hero fought, she knew she had made the right decision. Without a word, the girl finally chose her path. Later, at school, some first-year students who entered the classroom were stunned after seeing Suzy, then in second grade. They were surprised to see her in that modest classroom, not entirely understanding how such a prominent figure could be there. A student tried to claim his seat, but the young woman threatened him with an intimidating tone for daring to approach her. The boy, flattered by her words, decided to leave her be. Seeing the fiery beauty talk to the protagonist so naturally, everyone in the class envied her evident luck. Young Hoo, politely, asked her to leave the classroom, leaving Suzy indifferent, almost as if she didn't notice others when she spoke to him. The protagonist thought about asking her something similar, claiming that the teacher would arrive soon. Suzy, surprised by how good a student her love interest appeared to be, decided that she would also leave, but she stated she needed his phone number first. Saying this, the young woman left, promising to contact him later. All the boys in the room felt a pang of jealousy upon hearing Suzy refer to the class leader with such familiarity. Meanwhile, the class president, who watched silently, examined what he held in his hands, lamenting the situation. Shortly after, a student running hurriedly entered a first-year classroom and announced that the new leader ordered everyone to gather in the auditorium. The former followers of the Brown Bear group were horrified to see how they had treated the new responsible person. However, the other students seemed eager for the assembly. Without delay, the first-year boys left their classrooms and headed toward the auditorium. When they opened the door, they encountered an imposing staircase and an overwhelming back wall ahead. Those unaware of the purpose of the gathering sensed a suffocating atmosphere. The two bullies were especially nervous. However, upon seeing the new leader, the curly-haired one was the first to greet him. After a brief silence, the leader raised his voice with all his strength, asserting himself over the other students. A kind-hearted soul said that he was not a leader, but simply a boy from the capital, and that's why he jumped off the stage to be on the same level as everyone else, proposing that all get along from now on. The bullies had difficulty following him. Nook explained that he did not want to be their boss, but his friend. Bullfist was very pleased with this display of kindness, wishing to be seen as someone who could help in difficult times, pointing out that someday they would probably have to trust each other. Then he assured everyone that they were useful and needed to live purposefully, forbidding them from stealing from other children. Wook reminded them that they should always face an adversary of similar level. Finally, the kind giant said that they should repent together to graduate peacefully and asked those who agreed to shout, "Yes." After taking a deep breath, he shouted loudly, but was only met with confused silence. Some embarrassed students thought it was some kind of war cry. Only then, Young Tai shouted it, followed by Young Hoo and Huang Xin. The entire class responded enthusiastically to his command. However, only those who shouted yes loudly in front of their new leader were satisfied. The boy realized how kind-hearted the soul of the protagonist was, whom he considered a wonderful person, different from himself. Young Tai began to admire the boy from the capital, and thus Nook had gained a group of new friends. 7 days had already passed since then, and the bullies had stopped bothering the weaker students. The student considered a geek claimed to 2 classmates that he was an expert at that game, which motivated both to ask him to add them as friends, exemplifying the peace that had been established in the less hierarchical classroom. Suzy asked the hero if he had any plans after school. She suggested going out to eat, even to karaoke or to visit a DVD lounge, leaving everyone surprised. Only the overweight boy declared that he had a date, which left Suzy with a somber expression, realizing he would meet another girl. But to her surprise, the boy explained that it was a study date. No one wanted to study with the class president that day. The girl immediately turned her gaze to see whom he was talking to. Following the gaze of the other students, he saw a nerdy girl focused on her books. The second-year girl interested in love wanted to study but asked him out on a date, suggesting they do it the next day. Bullfist claimed that he and his friends had already reserved the bus for the following day, which irritated the girl. Susie even said he would get in trouble if he bothered her again and pushed him rudely aside. Youngho's friends started to feel pity for him, seeing how much the girls disliked him. That very afternoon, after the outing, the class president met the new grade leader. Kim Ju mentioned that her presence could cause trouble, which intrigued the boy. She explained that being together was displeasing to their superiors. The president wanted to avoid misunderstandings, as she was only there to help the transferred student. Then she bowed her head and saw how the kind giant looked at her with a strange expression. Just as she was starting to feel confused, he patted her on the head and said she was adorable, causing her to blush even more and hasten the conversation. Soon after, in a cafe, the president was giving the protagonist an English lesson. But as they continued, he started to yawn. Seeing this, she decided to stop the lesson for the day, and the boy did not object. After gathering his things, she noticed some objects in his backpack. Then she handed him medicine, seeing how hurt he was after his last fight. She tried to explain herself, but the boy claimed his superior already gave him the same remedy. That's why the classroom president decided to take him away. However, seeing the sadness on the young girl's face, our hero put a bandage on her head and thanked her for the medicine, assuring her he would use it, which filled the girl with joy. Without further delay, they decided not to waste time and hurried to catch the train. Meanwhile, old thugs from Kidok had difficulty reaching him. One of them asked Afro what he thought of the new boss, while the third said he was a kind person with whom they could get along. However, the boy hesitated, remembering the glory days they experienced under the leadership of the brown bear. At that moment, the student accidentally bumped into someone. Afro quickly apologized for his carelessness. The thug stepped forward, causing a scene, saying his arm hurt a lot. So the young man apologized again and quickly moved away. Only then did the adult ask him to come closer. Afro realized he was in trouble. His friend advised him to stay calm, as fighting would only cause problems. With no other option, the boy accepted this logic and apologized again to the adult. He then began to mock his education, saying that that generation lacked manners. The friend tried to intervene gently, admitting that it had been their mistake. But immediately, the adult slapped him for apologizing on behalf of his friend. Seeing the bully's violence, Afro decided to attack, but he missed his punch and received a kick to the stomach. Falling to the ground, the abuser mocked him and encouraged his friends to help him beat the secondary school student. Then, the young man was pelted with a bunch of flip-flops, insults, and blows that did not stop. At that moment, he spotted a nearby brick and thought he could no longer stand it. His friends managed to stop the adult, and in an impulsive act, the secondary school student decided to fight back, surprising everyone. Just then, a hand grabbed him. When he turned around, he saw it was his superior, Su Dogko, who angrily demanded that he had already contacted the authorities. The presence of the adults forced them to retreat, defeated, while the young man ordered them to leave, realizing that it was better to leave things as they were. A few minutes earlier, while working, a third-year student had witnessed a nearby fight. Recognizing some of his subordinates in it, Sudo commented that they had nothing better to do. Only then did he notice that one of those lying on the ground was discreetly grabbing a brick. Realizing his intentions, the young man was forced to act quickly to prevent a murder. Later, his classmates expressed their gratitude to him, and he modestly replied that it was nothing, only that they should thank him once again. Afro raised his hat to check if the elder was still there. Sadoko wanted to speak, but instead of punishments or reproaches feared by the nervous young people, he simply advised them not to ruin their lives with a single action, filling them with deep relief. Finally, the third-year student left the scene. Then, Sudogo realized he had acted like an old man just to be called by his boss, who urged him to hurry, making him run back to work. After a long day, the boys decided to go home. Later, at night, Afro asked others in the chat to enjoy the evening, while he searched for the missing leader. That was when he saw a girl with 3 boys, and upon recognizing her, he felt a deep discomfort, as she had begged him several times not to bring his lovers to her house. The horrible surprise came when he noticed that the 3 suitors were not strangers, but people he did not know. The girl quickly moved away, urging the boys to stop their foolishness. The man, angry at the rejection, decided to act violently, but suddenly an unknown force intervened and slapped him in the name of the young woman, surprising everyone with its swift appearance. The attacker, very angry, tried to find out who that uncomfortable figure was, and upon closely inspecting him, recognized the teenager he had previously hit. This made him even angrier, believing that the minor was a bully. Afro warned them to step away, assuring that he had already called the authorities, which further infuriated the assailant, who thought that just mentioning the police would scare them off. Then, with all his strength, he kicked him in the stomach, causing him to fall to the ground in pain, much to the horror of the young woman. The young man desperately tried to get up while she shouted at him for what he had done. Frustrated by the situation, the man decided to attack them, starting with the girl, whom he struck with a blow. However, once again, the teenager intervened and protected her with his body, causing the attacker to fall to the ground once more. The assailant's fury intensified, and mercilessly, he delivered a hard kick to the face, followed by a series of punches to his body. Now, under his feet, the young man felt helpless and angry. Amid the attack, he spotted a nearby stone, and in his desperation, he thought it might be his weapon to put an end to his bully. However, he remembered the wise words of his superior, who advised him to act intelligently and cautiously in the face of violence. The boy felt a deep sense of frustration when he remembered something that seemed just right at the lowest point of his situation. Just then, a whistle sounded, announcing the presence of the delinquents, who had finally been spotted. Upon seeing them, they quickly decided to run away from the scene. As they fled, an officer approached the boy to check on him. Afro confirmed that he was uninjured and thanked him for his concern. The young woman, seeing that he was able to express gratitude, was surprised, which greatly irritated the beaten one. However, she chose to stay quiet and encouraged him to go back home. The woman took his hand and, when he asked to have dinner, reproached him for not having eaten anything all day. The next day at school, the young man told his friend about his nocturnal adventure and began complaining about the bad luck he had gotten. At that moment, one of the 3 friends became alert upon noticing that the boss and his accomplices were approaching. The 3 of them straightened up and stepped aside to let them pass. When the leader and his companions moved away, Afro opened his eyes to make sure the authorities had left, only to meet the gaze of the giant who seemed to scan his soul. The scared boy asked if there was any problem, to which the boss, known as Boss 99, replied that it wasn't necessary for them to step aside. Afro was confused until the protagonist explained that such behavior was not typical among friends. Then he approached a boy named Diaku, surprised that the boss knew his name, and asked him about his injuries. Afro said he had fallen down the stairs, and the leader simply grunted and "Ga," leaving the young man confused. The protagonist demanded again to know who was responsible for his injury, shouting, "Ga." Doku tried to stick to his story, but Afro, now face to face with his new friend, asked him if he had brushed his teeth. In response, the boy yelled that he was covering up the horrible smell of saliva and bad breath, and the others also declared they were ready to fight. The united reaction surprised the criminals, who did not expect such support. Then, Nook, furious, saw that someone had mistreated his companion Doku, and that ignited his anger. Subsequently, the boys went out to find the attacker. The area seemed lively and festive. Hydra hurried over and asked if they had heard a particular noise. The friends confirmed, and he explained that it was the sound of his vitality running through that wonderful place. In his hurry to get home late, he started to run and suddenly saw a beautiful young woman. Hydra quickly approached her, but just as he was about to compliment her, she immediately rejected him, calling him an idiot. The young woman continued to insult him, annoyed by his boldness, and walked away saying that his face was repulsive. Afro's friends couldn't help feeling sorry for him, as that experience had been quite tough. Diagu told the protagonist that it wasn't necessary for him to approve those actions on his behalf. His friend agreed, since they weren't sure if the attacker would be present in that place, and suggested returning, though the leader stated they could have fun afterward. At that moment, Afro finally spotted the man they had been looking for. Without hesitation, our hero called his friend and urged him to move quickly. The youths headed toward where the bully was, but upon arrival, the guards at the door told them to leave, arguing that minors were not allowed inside. Unfazed, the kind giant confirmed that they were looking for someone in that place, although the guards remained indifferent. Then, our protagonist deployed his secret technique, the sexy tiger eyes, and ordered with authority that he be allowed to enter. As if by magic, those who had previously blocked their way now let them into the building. Meanwhile, his friends, stunned by what had happened, remained confused about the situation. Inside, there were the sounds of glasses clinking, as the criminal and his friends were having a good time. He told his companion that he had encountered the same annoying guy the day before. When she asked him what had happened, he proudly replied that he had knocked him out to get better. The young woman found the story amusing, but was later surprised to see a commanding look watching them from the door. Suddenly, Chief 99 entered the scene, and upon seeing Afro, he immediately recognized the young man and started laughing, joking that he had probably gone to cry on his friend's shoulders. Dooku began to feel uncomfortable. His friend clarified that they only wanted him to offer a simple apology. At that moment, the girl took a commanding stance and, with imposing eyes, asked him not to interfere in matters that were not his concern. The young woman started blushing from the tension. Seeing this, the criminal threw his head down onto the table, increasing the fear among his accomplices. He was clearly irritated by the younger, more robust individual whom he had asked to shut up, but when he received no response, he repeated his words. Nyan Wook insisted that all they wanted was for the man to sincerely apologize to his friend, although the criminal saw it as just another foolish thing. Tired of waiting, the adult decided to attack the young man. Then, the gentle giant activated a secret technique to strengthen his abs and shield himself from the blow, also breaking the attacker's arm in the process. The wrongdoer shouted in pain. Our protagonist explained to his friend that the criminals weren't seeking justice, but rather trying to take advantage of the situation. The man claimed that he and the rest of the group could become violent for his cause, which Afro doubted to believe. Chief 99 explained that he considered his friend family, and that they should always help each other. Our hero told Dooku that he saw him as one of their own, and the boy pointed out how useless he was and how stupid his boss was. Afro, in response, showed gratitude from the bottom of his heart, finally recognizing him as his true leader. After a brief fist bump, Nook asked if his friend was aware of what his next step should be. The boy smiled and stated that they would guide the thugs toward redemption. Shortly after, the one with the broken arm found himself facing the protagonist, who used his technique called Predator. At that moment, the teenager emitted an aura that surpassed the presence of the adults surrounding them. The younger's technique also had a different effect on the adult women present. The friends of the kind giant warned that the action had already begun. The thug felt extremely annoyed, and Nook told him that he had wasted the mercy shown to him. Just as the criminal tried to intimidate the boy by revealing his identity, he clarified, to stop acting like a child. With an even darker rage, the man demanded to know who the young man was before vowing to end him. Our hero replied that he didn't need that information. Noticing that it was the adult who had made the mistake, the thug was even more terrified. Nook explained that, although one might not live like a saint, they should avoid causing trouble for others. Thus, the kind giant advised him to start over. Suddenly, someone asked about Jean Su, and the teenagers became intrigued when a group of men resembling a band appeared unexpectedly. The bully began to laugh, claiming that his attackers were doomed. When the smoker asked again about Jean Su, Hydra was surprised to realize that they were cornered by men in suits. At that moment, someone appeared from behind the man. It was someone interested in the presence of minors in that place. Huang Xin started sweating profusely, worried, while Yung Tai and Young, who also remained alert. Then, finally, the figure stopped. The man, who introduced himself as a graduate of Guyong from the class of 1994, ordered the teenagers to reveal who they were. The boys understood they were in a difficult situation, as they were dealing with someone from an older class, an alumnus of the same school. And just when they were beginning to discuss whether begging could save them, the man expressed his anger at their silence. Young Tai tried to justify that they were just passing by, but the adult had trouble believing him, especially because they were inside a building restricted to minors. After a complete failure in negotiations, the leader ordered to deal with the intruders, and the adults began to consider the possibility of confronting children who knew they were in a tough spot. Bullfist understood that any misstep could complicate things further, so he asked the protagonist to come up with a plan. The boss stepped out of the door, took a moment to assess the situation. Afro assured him they would follow his instructions without question. His two friends confirmed they were ready to act, and Hydro displayed a particularly determined attitude. Jungai, sharing that resolve, asked the leader to give the final order. Everyone waited for the friend's decision, who smiled gently. And Wook explained that at that moment it was not worth talking, so it would be better to resort to violence first, before asking his men to avoid causing excessive damage. Upon hearing the order, the group responded with unified voices, a loud battle cry. In this way, the high school students managed to intimidate the adults. The scene filled the leader with anger, who considered them to be nothing more than minors. Therefore, from the number 94, he ordered the offensive, making his forces come back to reality and charge against the children, who faced them bravely at the last moment, just as one of the men was about to deliver the first blow. However, the blow was deflected against a door. The one who entered the room was none other than Sudeko, the waiter. The young people were stunned, as they had found their level mate who had discovered them in an impossible-to-explain situation. Upon recognizing him, the thugs quickly assumed he was part of their gang. The senior was once again facing trouble because of his underlings, as the three guards immediately turned against him. In the third year, alerted, he dodged the first punch without raising his hands. He continued to evade the attacks without responding with any strikes. His superior demanded that he understand his hostile attitude, just as he was dodging a slap that ended up on his plate, spilling food onto the floor. This enraged Sudanko, who again dodged the attacker's blow and, in a decisive move, grabbed the assailant by the collar and drove his knee into his chin. This left the first of the three combatants knocked out. When the second tried to strike him from behind, the teenager quickly crouched down, leaving him no chance to react, and finished him off with a powerful uppercut. The servant, angered, didn't stop and attacked him with a barrage of blows until the thug could no longer endure it. Finally, Sudarko landed a strike with such force that it sent the enemy flying against the wall. Witnessing this, the third attacker stared in horror and realized that the brave high school student was ready to attack him. Sudeko then delivered a powerful punch, knocking him unconscious. At that moment, he realized it would be impossible to keep his job. All the students were exerting themselves to surpass their adult opponents, except one. Hydra was defeated on the ground, while the attacker proudly stepped on him. Suddenly, a flying hand struck the aggressor and knocked him down, leaving him on his back. The young Tai rushed over to check on his friend, but he assured him that he was fine and had seen something on the ground. At that moment, the boy quickly became alert when he noticed that his friend, who was trying to help him, was about to be hit from behind. Suddenly, someone charged at the attacker and left him at the friend's feet. It was none other than Diaku, who told him not to get distracted. Jung Tai felt great relief and expressed his gratitude to his savior. The man the boy had knocked down quickly got up and swore they would pay for their actions. Meanwhile, two young men were surrounded by several adults. Bullfist was now with his superior, and the younger student demanded an explanation. Hearing Sadako complain that they were causing problems at their workplace, the young man understood why his superior, who worked until very late, always seemed tired in class, despite saying he didn't care. Sadako immediately scolded him for his bad manners, and the younger student pointed out how many times he had heard those complaints. Then, the superior stated that for him, everyone in the 99 cohort was the same, and simply struck one of his many rivals. As the fight was unfolding, the protagonist felt that something was approaching. Someone came up to him and congratulated him on his performance, saying they were just ordinary high school students. The person in charge, excited, commented that it had been a long time since he had been able to humiliate someone. At that moment, the two bosses looked at each other face to face. Young Tai, along with Yonghu and the other students, directed their gazes toward the two giants studying each other with dark looks. The adult decided to make the first move, and in an instant, the younger felt a fist beneath his cap, which he successfully dodged with ease. Our hero persisted in dodging the blows, although some managed to graze him. In the end, the adult delivered a strong punch that pushed a stocky miner back. However, the protagonist's expression remained impassive. The opponent, for his part, was surprised to see how easily he evaded his attacks, which increased his enthusiasm. The adult urged him to quit playing and save his skin while shedding his weighted bands, which made his henchmen realize that someone would end up injured that day. The weights were on the ground and weighed 1 kilogram, catching the hero's attention. The man claimed he was offended because his opponent had taken him for a fool. Realizing that the protagonist was not unleashing his full strength, the adult quickly stated that his attitude would change in an instant. Without a doubt, he threw a terrifying punch at him, swiftly charging with the intent to hurt. As a result, the 99th boss was thrown against the wall, leaving his friend worried about his safety. Our hero fell to the ground, while his opponent, knowing he had failed in his attack, urged him to stop pretending. He, who enjoyed the young man's agility and combat instincts, watched carefully. Noah quickly got up, adjusting his cap, and immediately, the adult decided to introduce himself. He identified himself as a graduate of Class 14, Lee Manhwa, leaving the entire group perplexed, as they discovered he came from the same school, especially from that legendary graduating class. Our hero also introduced himself humbly. Curious about the fact that he did not know the name of someone as formidable as the peaceful giant, Lee Manhwa quickly realized that he was not from his province. This further excited him and encouraged his opponent to step closer. Xian Wook explained that he assessed the opponent's strength based on his attacks. After deciding to face him seriously, he closed the distance and asked if he was acting correctly. Surprised to see a technique that could only be acquired through extensive training, using weights to refine it, the tall man believed they were evenly matched. However, he soon realized that he vastly outpaced his opponent in speed. At that moment, the miner finally struck a blow that left the adult stunned, knocking him against the wall with such force that some bricks broke. Although he saw it was too late, he couldn't help but smile, intrigued by how that young person had only needed a single hit. He thought perhaps they mistook him for a weak old man, but the gentle giant reminded him that attacking someone on the ground was forbidden. Despite recognizing this code of honor, Lee Manhwa warned that it would cost him dearly before launching himself again, this time with a quick strike. The protagonist initially dodged it and appeared calm, but he soon realized that his face was injured. Satisfied, the adult adjusted his attack angle and repeated his move. On the third charge, the young man managed to avoid the quick blows, but his face was scraped twice more. Without resistance, he continued to evade without counterattacking. Then, the adult saw that his speed was gradually diminishing. With such a powerful strike that it pushed him several steps back, Lee Manhwa managed to separate the two, acknowledging the young man's strength. He was surprised and commented that he was the first person, after his leader, to make him exert all his strength. Lee Manhwa firmly cautioned a young fighter who was fighting half-heartedly, warning him that he risked losing his life if he didn't take his ultimate technique seriously, known as the ultra-speed movement. Without giving him time to react, the school graduate launched himself at his opponent at bullet speed. The adult couldn't help but feel that the moves of Boss 99 seemed slow in comparison. Just as he was beginning to trust his victory, he suddenly found himself face to face with a strike, and in an instant, our protagonist managed to counter with his technique and deliver a quick blow to the face. The scene left everyone astonished, as an adult was sent flying against the wall by a simple teenager. The henchmen were especially surprised and worried about the safety of their senior leader. From a higher source within the Seoul team, Lee Manhwa learned that they had been defeated by the Ghost's crew in the capital, consisting of two men gaining fame throughout Korea. These two legendary figures destroyed everything in their path, but no one knew their identities or motives. The legend present at the scene described the first as someone with a strong jaw and mechanical laughter, while the second had his left arm covered in tattoos and an indestructible abdomen. Lee Man-ho recognized the protagonist's technique as a counterattack, and upon realizing that he matched the description of the elder brother, he quickly understood that he was facing true legends. Immediately, he showed high tension at the situation, recognizing the greatness of the moment. Meanwhile, the angry henchmen decided to take revenge for their leader's fall, but Lee Man-ho ordered them to stop. Finally, the adult declared that the children had won the fight, and soon laughter echoed throughout the establishment. Lee Man-ho, sitting beside the heroes, was laughing loudly, showing his satisfaction with the scene. Everyone was puzzled when they realized it was a misunderstanding on his part, and he turned to the troublemaker, assuring him that he wouldn't have helped if he had known he caused all that chaos. The henchman, nervous, let out an awkward chuckle and justified himself trembling, to which Lee Man-ho asked him to stop joking and live honestly. Then, the leader stated that the true responsible parties for demanding an apology were the teenagers, and after giving some words to the insulted one, he finally admitted that he had acted out of anger, frustrated by difficult days. The boss approached the young man with afro hair and said that, since the situation involved him, he would decide what to do. After a brief moment of reflection, Dyaku said he was satisfied with the apology and advised the man not to cause more trouble in his neighborhood. Once the delinquent accepted the conditions, Cyan-wook told him to leave the room. The gang member apologized again, but just as it seemed he was about to leave, he was suddenly stopped by Lee Man-ho, who warned him that he would break his bones if he ever broke his word. The threat froze him with fear, and the man promised to fulfill his commitment before rushing out of there. Surprised by how quickly everything was resolved, the young man explained to his subordinate that he also bore some responsibility and handed him his card, assuring him he would pay twice what he owed if they ever needed him. He also insisted that they keep his number, as they would surely need his help at some point. Immediately afterward, Lee Man-ho ordered his men to leave immediately, and they all quietly followed him. Once the adults left, Hydra commented that he had mistaken the visitors for gangsters, a common mistake among the younger ones. After a long day, the leader suggested that everyone go their own way, as they had classes the next day. Just as Yong-hoo was about to say goodbye, Dooku took the floor. He and his friends bowed in respect and thanked their companions for their support. At that moment, Bullface proposed demonstrating their gratitude by allowing them some time in the computer room. However, when the afro-haired youth said that it was impossible, the disappointment was widespread. The leader intervened, clarifying that friendship shouldn't be so formal. Young Tai then asked about his superior who had gone to his other job. According to Bullfist, while making a call, Lee Man-ho was very satisfied, as his boss called at the perfect moment. Furthermore, inside the school, within the meeting room, a meeting was taking place. The second-year students looked nervous, and the third-year students seemed worried, although the one who appeared angriest was their leader, especially when he saw that the seats of his subordinates were empty. One of the senior students commented that the freshmen were reckless and did not attend the meetings, while another, considered one of the strongest, stated that they needed to learn discipline because they were having trouble raising funds. Then, he addressed the leader of 88 and said that the transfer students from the first year, whom he had interacted with, would arrive that day. When asked if they were trustworthy, Changog showed a gloomy expression before putting on a smile. Meanwhile, in the hallway, a young man and a young woman were walking calmly through the school, looking comfortable and at peace. Finally, Boss or Ninth stated that they would soon regain control of the youth's leadership position.